Good afternoon to you. It is exactly 3 p.m. here in Nairobi. A very good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and joining us from. Today being the 15th of March, 2023. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, and today we are going to look at one of the countries that had been perceived to be a very strong beacon of democracy across Africa, but the recent events that have been happening there, as long as its politics is concerned, is raising a lot of concern, not just in the country, but also across the West African region. And that is what we are going to look at this afternoon. That country is Senegal, which got its independence from France in 1960. So I'll just do, as usual, a very quick background information, and then I'd like for us to just pay a special spotlight on two presidents, the current president Macky Sall and the one that came before him, Abdoulaye Wade, and that is what I'd like for us to talk about this afternoon. Now, in August 20th, 1960, Senegal formally achieved its independence, with the National Assembly of Senegal proclaimed the country's independence and withdrawal from the Mali Federation, which had consisted of Mali and Senegal. In order to deal with the consequences of withdrawing from the federation, Prime Minister Mamadou Dia proclaimed a state of emergency on August 21st, 1960. And on August 25th, 1960, the National Assembly adopted a constitution creating a mixed parliamentary and presidential system in Senegal. And by the way, just a side note, Senegal is just one of those countries that have been practicing elections from since it got its democracy. Elections have been going on in Senegal. And that's why usually it is revered as one of those countries that are strong as far as their democracy is concerned, until some just few years back, when that has been challenged in regards to the kinds of leaders they've been having. There. So I'll just skip, because I don't want us to get too much into that. It's a lot of information. So legislative elections were held in December 1963, and the Senegalese Progressive Union won all the seats in the National Assembly, and President Senghor, that is the first president in Senegal, by the way, was re-elected in December 1st, 1963, and after that, in March 22nd, in 1967, President Senghor survived an assassination attempt by one of his close allies there, and then the story continues. And then just closer to where now President Abdoulaye Wade, at this time he was really active. He was a very active opposition figure. The Democratic Party of Senegal claimed election fraud. When elections happened in 1988, the government declared a 3-month state of emergency in the Dakar region, and government police arrested Abdoulaye Wade, leader of the PDS, on February 29, 1988, and Abdoulaye Wade was released from detention on May 12, 1988, and the government lifted the state of emergency on May 17, 1988. And so the stories go on about there. So in April 2000, President Abdoulaye Wade appointed Mustafa Niasse. He was elected in 2000. So he appointed Mustafa Niasse as Prime Minister on the 5th of April, and a new constitution was approved by 94% of the voters in a referendum held in January 7th, 2001. And, you know, since he had really fought for against the status quo in Senegal, when President Abdoulaye Wade came to power, he was really seen as a person who truly captured the aspirations and what Senegal stood for as far as its democracy is concerned. But once he came to power, he decided, and then he He changed the constitution in 2001, and let me just look at some of the changes that were made in this constitutional referendum, which was held on the 7th of January 2001. Voters were asked whether they approved of a new constitution. It was approved by 94% of the votes, and leading to early parliamentary elections taking place in April 2001. And so the proposed constitution would abolish the Senate, which had only came into existence in 1999. And its first election had been boycotted by the opposition parties who viewed the creation as unnecessary. It also reduced the presidential term limit from 7 years to 5. And when President Abdoulaye Wade came to power during that time, the constitution allowed for 2 terms that could go for 7 years. And then he changed that. And to 5 years each term, and one could go for about 2 years. And so because of that referendum that happened, he decided to run again. And when he decided to run again, that caused a bit of a problem there in Senegal. It did cause a problem in Senegal, and it did cause a crisis there in Senegal, because there were some arguments that he was having a constitutional coup. And in his defense, because he was cleared by the constitutional court, he was allowed to run again. The court cleared him to run again because he says now he's running under the new constitution. I think this was a strategy and a plan that he had really crafted, and maybe Senegalese had not really understood what really was behind this kind of power strategy. And he ran again in 2012 after having served from 2000 to 2012, almost 12 years, and of course he was defeated. And Senegal, as I've said, there has been holding elections since independence. And this change and this constitutional change that President Abdoulaye Wade oversaw, many saw it as a move that was meant for self-preservation, and he was just doing it for his own personal gain. And also he was being accused of lining up his son to succeed him, and Senegal having practiced democracy for as long as it had been practicing democracy since its independence, Senegalese were like, no. We don't. This is not a monarchy, so you can't have stayed this long, changed the constitution. Now you want to run for an illegal 3rd term, and after that you're preparing your son to come and take over. That will not be allowed here, because Senegal is not a monarchy. And so, as I said, the Constitutional Court allowed him to run, and so he did run, and the opposition came together. Not all of them, but people are already tired of President Abdoulaye Wade, and so President Macky Sall, the current president of Senegal, was elected. And that is where I think our basis of the conversation is going to be measured on this afternoon, and that is because there has been a protest happening in the streets of Dakar and major towns in Senegal, opposing President Macky Sall intentions. There has been some allegations being made that President Macky Sall, Senegal is going to its elections in 2024, and President Macky Sall has already served the 2 terms that are allowed by the Constitution. But there has been some rumors that he could be planning to also have another 3rd term, illegal 3rd term in 2024. And this caused a lot of acrimony even in the party that saw him fire former Prime Minister Aminata Touré, who was fighting against a possible 3rd term by her former boss, and President Macky Sall, who remained silent on his intentions regarding the 24 presidential elections. He's been mum about this. So his key supporters, some of them are not really up for this idea, so they fought it, and one of them is the former Prime Minister who was working under him, Aminata Touré, who was fired because of taking that position. And the president's supporters say the 2016 constitution allows him to run again, while his critics say it does not. So even him, President Macky Sall, went ahead and changed the constitution because he saw the former president, Abdoulaye Wade, used it, changed the constitution to allow him to run for an illegal third term. So he thought this is also a strategy that he could also use to allow him to sneak himself after the term that is allowed by the constitution for him to also be allowed to run for another term. So he has expressed intentions actually, but he has not come out outrightly to say if at all he will be on the ballot or not. I think it's just testing the waters and see how Senegalese will receive this. But because I think the Constitutional Court cleared Abdoulaye Wade to run at that time, I think in his mind he feels he can get away with it. But when you look at the issues that were voted for in the 2001 referendum, they're quite different. They're quite different, and the choice, the issues that they voted for was quite different. And let's look at the issues that were part of the constitutional amendments that are necessitated for a referendum in Senegal in 2016. The basis by which President Macky Sall feels that because of these constitutional changes and the referendum that took place in the country now allows him to run again because of this new constitution that he saw. So there are a total of 15 changes that were proposed in the Constitution, and one of them was modernizing the role of political parties in the democratic system. The other was the participation of independent candidates in all types of elections. Just follow with me and see which one really affects the executive, because usually if there's any article in the constitution, well, according to the Kenyan constitution, and I think majority of countries that practice democracy, if a key change touches on say executive and maybe the composition of parliament, then that might necessitate for a referendum and have the people decide on that because those are very weighty matters that cannot be left for parliament to legislate upon. And so the third one was the promotion of local governance and territorial development by creating the High Council of Local Authorities. Those are 3 points. None of them touches on the executive. Recognition of new rights for citizens, rights to healthy environment, their land holdings and their natural resources. Still, nothing there that warrants, a change in the executive. The strengthening of citizenship by the consecration of the duty of the citizen, the restoration of the 5-year term of the for the presidential mandate. That was already captured in 2001 when they had that referendum in 2001. So he put it there as a point, as in part of the 15 changes that were proposed for this new constitution, strengthening the rights of the opposition and its leaders. That is number 7. And of course, the number 6, and I'll just repeat it, the restoration of the 5-year term for the presidential mandate. That was still there. That had not changed. And then the 8th point was the representation of Senegalese abroad by having their own dedicated deputies, and then the extension of the powers of the National Assembly in matters of monitoring government action and evaluating policies publicly. As a lot of these issues I'm going through did not even warrant a whole referendum. These are things that Parliament would have legislated upon, and they would have passed these laws. It did not really require a referendum. And the submission to the Constitutional Council or organic laws for constitutional review before the promulgation, and increasing the number of members of the Constitutional Council from 5 to 7, Article 12 or change number 12, the designation by the President of the National Assembly of 2 of the 7 members of the Constitutional Council. And the 13th point was the extension of the powers of the Constitutional Council to give opinions and hear exceptions of unconstitutionality raised before the Court of Appeal. And then the constitutionalization of the principles of decentralization and deconcentration. And then the last point was the intangibility of the provisions relating to the Republican form to secularism with the indivisible democratic and decentralized character of the state, the mode of election, the duration of the number of mandates, consecutive years of the President of the Republic. But those years didn't change. I think that was already captured. And in fact, that was the key item that necessitated the referendum in 2001. And when you read through, these are really issues that did not really necessitate for a referendum. And so because he went ahead and had this referendum, so in his mind, President Macky Sall, who by the way is the current chairperson of the African Union, feels that because this referendum was done while he was still the president, and so his tenure will start counting after he's done with, I guess, his term. So he's allowed to to run again, because the part that he served under the old constitution before this new referendum does not count, because now they have a new referendum, and so, but nothing about the mandate, nothing about the term limit changed. It is the same way it was captured in 2001 under President Abdoulaye Wade. So because of this, he's using it as an excuse as to why he wants to run again, and I think unconstitutionally, but according to him, he feels it is very much constitutional, and also he feels because of the new constitution that allows him to have this kind of latitude to do so, and so. Because of that, that has really attracted a lot of criticism from key opposition figures, and we've seen how if you've been watching our news or any of these international media houses, and the story from Senegal is there has been a targeted attack on the opposition. One, his name is Sonko, I believe. He's been in and out. He's facing, one time he's facing rape charges, the next time he's facing these other charges. And right now, the Senegal's ex-prime minister is in custody after criticism. Let me just read that, because this is the latest. This news is from 5 days ago, and Senegal's former prime minister has been taken into custody after he publicly suggested that the country's president had funded a French politician during a recent visit. I told you about that here a few days ago. So Sheikh Hagouibi Samouré was detained on Thursday, last week actually, but he has not been told the charges against him. His lawyer Adama Goye told a press conference on Thursday the government is accusing the ex-prime minister of trying to discredit President Macky Sall by publishing an open letter that suggested Sall gave money to French right-wing politician Marine Le Pen, the controversial French far-right leader, and Le Pen, a member of the France's National Rally Party, ran for the French presidency and lost last year, and visited the West African country in January. In an open letter published in local media last week, Samouré, who was prime minister from 2007 to 2009, accused Sall of giving 12 million euro from a poor country to a French politician. So these are accusations. But I'm feeling, if at all President Macky Sall feels that what the former prime minister is saying is not right, is not true, then you don't have someone arrested and detained just like that. I think there are proper laws that you should follow, and one of them should file a case and file a case against this person, because if he's damaging your reputation and is damaging your character, then it is within your right to file such a case and see the law take its course. And after that, if the court accedes and this process go through, and this person alleging these claims, then they will have to, there's a penalty for that. That is how that is expected to work, especially in a country like Senegal that is said to have practicing democracy since the early years, before the rest of us caught up, to it. And so that would be the right thing to do. So that is just one of the stories. And also in February, Senegal police smashed a car, forcibly removed an opposition leader from it. So you can see these kinds of intimidation and targeted attacks, and all of this comes from people who have been criticizing President Macky Sall because of this move that is said he wants to run for another term, contrary to the constitution. But he's saying, we had a referendum in 2016, and because of that allows me to run for another term. We had a referendum here in 2010. And I think the late now President what do you call him? I'm forgetting my former president, Kibaki. President Kibaki, the third president of the Republic of Kenya, carried us through this process. It happened during his presidency and towards the end of his second term. Okay? So towards the end of his second term, and then he did not run again under the new constitution after the 2010 constitution was promulgated. But I think maybe because our constitution was very explicit in the manner in which this new constitution will start applying, and that was after the next election. So some of the articles that had been included, especially around elections, were going to be applied after the next election. So maybe our constitution was very clear on that. But in Senegal's constitution, it does not provide for that. And so a vacuum has been left there that anybody now, and the way we're seeing President Macky Sall, wants to exploit it because it's not very clear on to when these specific changes of the constitution are meant to start applying. And so they just look at it blanketly. This is a new constitution. Well, I was elected under the old constitution, and so I can easily run now using this new constitution. I can seek for another mandate because now the older the previous terms I have served does not really account. So police in Senegal, like I said, in February, smashed the window of a car in which a top opposition leader was sitting and forced him from the vehicle, marking the latest unrest surrounding a likely challenger to the ruling party in elections last year. So he has been cracking down on opposition, and authorities later escorted Osman Sonko, that is the opposition leader, Osman Sonko, to his residence. Now, he's sitting in a car. You smash the window. You don't have a warrant of arrest. He hasn't done anything really. And then after that, there's nothing else you can do with him. You say, okay, now we're going to escort you to your house. They should stop saying Senegal is a mature democracy. Those are not things that happen in countries that respect the principles of democracy and have matured even how they handle their democracy. We can't disagree. That is what a democratic principles of democracy dictates. We can't disagree on principle. We can disagree on ideology. We can disagree on our support for whatever side we choose to support. But I should be able to respect your basic rights. That should not mean that I should just trample on your rights. Just like that, whether I'm in power or otherwise. So that is the problem. This vindictive politics we see in Africa, I think is just the downfall and is the downside of this multi-party democracy that we pretend to be, practicing in this continent. We are not alive to the true spirit of this kind of democracy. We struggle with it. We apply it when we feel it fits us. We quote the Constitution, like Macky Sall now, the way he's quoting the Constitution and what the Constitution allows him to do when he feels is going to serve his own interest. But when it comes to other parts of the Constitution that says every person enjoys basic rights, including freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, any kinds of freedom, as long as they're not operating outside of the Constitution, the government has a mandate to protect them. Then that is the part they decide to look the other side. But on the other flip side, they want to come and talk to us about Constitution and how the Constitution allows him. So you see how we pick and choose how to, make reference to the Constitution. And when the Constitution, we can use it we can weaponize even the Constitution for our own good. Now that's where the problem comes in, and it's just how we apply this Constitution in this continent that really sometimes it's quite appalling. And so that happened. So they escorted him to his house at that time, and his wars have continued, has continued. And Macky Sall served as the prime minister in Abdoulaye Wade's government, so he must have picked up some of these bad behaviors from Abdoulaye. And when Abdoulaye came to power, he was really a symbol of change that the people of Senegal were looking for. The struggle, because he was a long time suffering opposition. And finally he came to power, and Senegalese thought, okay, this is somebody that could bring us the change that we yearn for. And then he became something totally different. And while he was seeking to run, because he did run, although he did not win, Macky Sall took over, but he did run. And this time he put himself to run for a third term. He was 85 years old. When you look at his campaign images at that time, this is somebody who was supposed to be to be taking a nap somewhere and just enjoying his retirement, and just enjoying his retirement and the fact that he had already served Senegal for about 12 years. That would have been enough, for him, and the years and the struggle he's had for Senegal before he became the president. That would have been enough reward for him, but he had to keep going. At the age of 85, he still wanted to go for another third term. And so Macky Sall served under him. He was a prime minister under President Abdoulaye. And so maybe that's where he picked this bad manners, this constitutional coup crisis that we see, a third term crisis that we see a lot of our leaders here, really having a problem with. So in 2004, Sall was appointed Deputy Secretary General of WADE, Senegalese Democratic Party, and it's written in French as PDS. And so he served there as a Deputy Secretary General and also Prime Minister, the fourth for WADE in as many years, a position he held until he resigned in June. Soon afterward, he was elected President of the National Assembly. However, in November that year, PDS leader voted to abolish Sall's position within the party. And then, less than a year later, the National Assembly voted to significantly reduce the term of its presidency from 5 years to 1 year, effectively attempting to oust Sall from the government. He refused to give up his post, and the National Assembly soon passed a resolution to remove him from it. Many speculated that, despite his perceived status as Wade's protege, Sall had fallen out of favor with the ruling party after bringing Wade's son, Karim Wade, and it is said that he was really trying to groom his son to take over. I mentioned that at the beginning of this conversation, and before the National Assembly, for questioning about his alleged mismanagement of government funds. So everything that was done on him, all this unfairness that he was meted with because he disagreed in principle with the then president, these are the very same thing that he's doing now to the people who are criticizing him also on principle of, hey, we are a democratic country. We are run by the Constitution. And so we should respect the Constitution. And he can't even stomach that. So everything that was done to him, it's exactly what he's doing now. And I think even worse. So Wade, meanwhile, had started losing popularity. The country became disillusioned with him for a variety of reasons, including his lack of progress in preparing infrastructure, the steadily rising cost of living during his administration, and his pursuit of a third term as a president. In the run-up to the 2012 presidential elections, Sall emerged as one of Wade's strongest challengers out of the 13 opposition candidates, promising to bring down basic costs and reduce the presidential term from 7 to 5 years. In the first round of voting held in February 2012, Sall won about 75% of the vote, coming in second to Wade, who won about 35%. However, support for Sall surged before March runoff election, with all the opposition candidates standing behind him. He won the second round of voting by a landslide and about 66 to 34%, and was inaugurated as president on the 2nd April 2012. And Sall immediately set about downsizing the presidential candidate in order to cut costs. One of his prominent campaign promises to reduce the time a president could be in office came from the fruition of 2016. So he placed the term limit himself. He placed the term limit. And so apart from just decreasing the years, I guess that was not really included. I must have been wrong with my initial information that I gave there. So the terms from 7 years to 5, and limiting a president to 2 terms. So he's the one who set the term limits after what he saw Abdullahi trying to do to the country. And now, having gone through that, now he's becoming Abdullahi 2.0. Look at that. Okay, and so what this opposition have been doing is having a playback of what he was saying during that time. He was endearing himself to the people. And that is what he does not want to hear. He does not want to be reminded of what he said. He does not want to be reminded of what he said. And so the next, Sal submitted to the country's Constitutional Council in January 2016. The next month, the Constitutional Council rejected Sal's attempt to shorten his own current term. But the other proposals, including the presidential term reduction that will take effect after he left office, were allowed to be put to referendum. So even in the Senegalese constitution, there's no that laguna. The court said these changes that have been effected in the constitution in the referendum, they'll only be effect after you're done with your terms and you're gone. Then the incoming government, that is when they'll start implementing this. But why would he, if the constitution is this explicit, why would he just negate in all these gains and some of these reforms that he spearheaded, and now he just wants to pee on them and decide, forget what I said 5 years ago, but this is me now, and I think I can still lead you, and I'm still here, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this is what has really caused a lot of problems for Mr. Sall. And in contrast to Sal's achievement, were the accusations that he was growing intolerant of the opposition and dissent, demonstrations against him and the actions of his administrations were held, some of which were violently broken up by security forces. Some opposition figures who were jailed claimed that the charges against them were politically motivated. An election law passed in 2018 made it more difficult to become a presidential candidate, and it was criticized for effectively limiting the number of potential challengers to Sall in the next election. In addition, two of his most prominent challengers were unable to run because of previous criminal proceedings against them, which critics said were suspect. Against this backdrop, Sall was favored to win election, and he did, securing 58% of the vote in the presidential election held in February 24, 2019. And still, that is not enough for him. He still wants to run again. So the latest on this story yesterday, supporters of Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko rallied in Dakar, the first of several days of protest as the country prepares for elections less than a year. Tensions are rising ahead of the vote in a country seen as a democratic mainstay in the region, amid speculation that President Macky Sall could bypass the constitution and seek a third presidential term. The demonstration, called by the People Coalition, was the first authorized by authorities in recent months. And Sonko is expected in court on Thursday, that is tomorrow, after being sued by Tourism Minister Mame Mbaye Niang for defamation, insult and forgery. He accuses Sonko of defaming him in relation to his management of a community agriculture program. He also faces separate charges of rape and making death threats based on a complaint by an employee at a beauty salon where he was getting a massage. Sonko has denied the charges and accused authorities of trying to silence him and his party with arbitrary arrest and the instrumentalization of the justice system against the opponents. And the guilty verdicts could render Sonko ineligible, the same thing that President Macky Sall did to other opposition leaders during the last elections, because he had, together with the courts, worked and made sure that charges were leveled against these leaders in a way that they did not qualify to run for elections. So any guilty verdict on Sonko would render him ineligible to stand in the presidential vote set for February 2024. The rally took place in a working class district in the capital, with supporters chanting and dancing while sporting T-shirts and caps, shawls in the Senegalese colors of green, yellow and red. Many business owners closed up their shops, mindful of clashes and looting that broke out last month in the central city of Mbake after Sonko rally was banned. The rape charge against Sonko in March 2021 had also sparked riots that caused around a dozen deaths. And Sonko is relatively young compared to the current president. He's 48 and he's pledged a Pan-African cooperation while taking aim at Senegal's elites and alleged corruption, and also accuses former colonial power France and multinational firms of having excessive influence on the country's economy and politics. And in a statement on Monday, the President Alliance for the Republic Party accused Sonko and his party of embracing an insurrectionary mindset. See, so that is just the latest in the political scene there in Senegal, even as it works its democracy out. So obviously, Sonko seems to be a very formidable threat to the sitting president, Macky Sall, who has been accused of attempting to run for an illegal third term, and that makes Senegal's democracy, which had been known to be quite stable compared to other democracies in Africa, to be very shaky, and it is facing a test to its, I think, strength and its a dominance there. But I think time will tell, and this is a story I'll be following up for you and see if at all President Macky Sall decides to run for that third term that is being accused of wanting to do against the Constitution. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. I'll see you again here tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye for now.